In this first unit, we're going to start to take a look at some of the periodizations of time, where Western civilization is looking for its origins. Remember, as you've gone through your readings, you've noticed that historians are only as good as the sources they can find. And for the very early period of human civilization, we're very reliant on archaeology and emerging archaeological trends as people are discovering more and more about our ancestors. What we have done in Western civilization is, since we're looking for evidence, we have to use what we can find. In the context of this first part of the unit, we're looking at the ability of us to understand some of our early ancestors, and as you may have seen in some of your readings, we're looking at things like cave paintings. We're also looking at religious sites. We're looking at any kind of technology that was left behind by our ancestors. And in many ways, our ancestors who left Africa thousands and thousands of years ago and spread around the globe have left behind evidence of where they were at. They've left us behind technology, some of the stone tools that they made, and some of the things they've been eating, the animals and things like that. So we have some very early evidence, but we're going to have to use as best we can the evidence we have found. In the case of the Stone Age, all right, we're looking at a time period that was of the earliest origins about until 10,000 years ago, about 10,000 of the Common Era, all right? Remember, as we're looking at Western civilization, you'll see in your textbook two different kinds of time. They'll usually use the idea of CE, Common Era, or BCE, before the Common Era. It aligns with the older system, which was AD, Anno Domini, or the year of our Lord, after the year zero, or BC, the time period before the year zero. They align essentially with the same choice of when the beginning of time is with the number zero, but exactly how they express it is different. But in the context of what we want to do now, looking at early civilizations of human life, the Stone Age, we're essentially using what it says. We're using stone tools. We're seeing that humans have been able to create different hunter-gatherer societies. They're using the stone tools around them. They're making efforts to go after and live in compatibility with the animals that many of them traveled with. Right? These are not sedentary. These are not civilizations that stay in one place. These are nomads. These are the kind of people that over time are going to follow wherever the herds of animals, or if they're along the oceans, they're going to be following, of course, whatever food sources they have. These are not peoples who are building permanent cities, and they're not as yet practicing sedentary or permanent agriculture in one place. In your textbook, you'll see that this is a very early time period of human civilization, and it is one without writing sources, and it is one without significant urban settlement. Remember, historians are only as good as the records they can find and the records they can use, and in this very early civilization, there's very little that we have been able to encounter. It's not nothing, but it's not a lot. So take a look at some of the ways in which they're talking in your texts about this early Stone Age and how this is setting the sort of table for the civilizations to come. Okay? After that, we have what's called the Neolithic Age. This is a time period where there is the emergence of sedentary agriculture, where there are people who are learning how to domesticate both plants and animals and live essentially in one spot or in a very small area and grow their own food resources. Either grains in many places in the world, or various kinds of animals are also used in terms of domestication. So this is a time frame of history where we're now starting to have people who are going to be living in one place together for long periods of time. They're not going to be wandering, they're not going to be nomadic, and increasingly what we have is people who are going to be, when they stay in one place, they do what historians love and archaeologists too, they create garbage. They create waste. They build structures of various kinds. They leave behind hard physical evidence that we can use to interpret their lives. Bones of animals, we can take a look at pollen, we can take a look at things in the garbage dump in terms of ceramics, or other tools that were created or made. Perhaps artwork of various kinds, maybe jewelry. You never know what kind of things get left behind in a garbage dump, and for historians and archaeologists, that's a key element. Once again, getting the evidence to understand the past, not speculate, but find evidence and interpret it is always the key for what we're doing. The Neolithic era is going to start to provide us, in general, with more and more sources, more and more archaeological sites. We can take a look at the construction of buildings and then take a look at how they're doing it. everything from the bricks and mortar they're using to the ideas and contexts of line and symmetry. Also, we're taking a look at seeing how they actually access their structures. Are there structures that look like human settlement places, buildings, apartments? Are they individualized? Or are there grand temple complexes or palace complexes? That's the kind of information we're looking for in the Neolithic age to lead us into an understanding of what comes next. The next age that historians like to refer to is the Bronze Age. Now, this is a time period where, looking at the ability of various peoples, they now have the ability to at least collect, melt, and use things like tin and create bronze. Tin is an interesting metal. It's not as strong as iron or other metals, but it is able to be used as in terms of making knives or spear points or shields, or later on, say, ceremonial plates and bowls or jugs, okay? Now, it is going to be a relatively expensive thing. It will be for the elite, but the combination of knowing how to learn how to create the combination of tin and copper that makes bronze. Where do you mine the metal? How do you sift through it? How do you melt it? How do you put it together in a proper combination? And then, of course, how do you work it? What is the ability of people to use it in terms of something practical? In this case, say, warheads on arrows or shields, all right? This is the idea of a Bronze Age that, once again, is linked to a concept. The concept being the ability of a society or culture to have the sophistication to learn how to work metals like tin and copper, which are readily available in many places in the Middle East, and then will be used in applicable ways in a household or in a war setting. And then as we work through the next age, we'll be working at what's essentially going to be called the Iron Age. And as it states, it's simply the age when people learn to manipulate iron. Right? In terms of its durability, iron is very hard. It has a much firmer use to it. Imagine at some point in time some sort of military battle where one side is using metal swords and the other side is using wooden and alloys of copper and tin in various forms. It's going to be pretty much a foregone conclusion. Essentially, iron, the ability to extract iron ore, to smelt it properly, to remove many of the impurities, and then, of course, learning how to work it, how to harden it, how to create it and use it as weapons or plates or anything else that you want it for. That is another sign of a technology. And what's also useful in terms of both the Bronze and the Iron Ages is those implements endure over time. Hidden in water or hidden in areas in, say, later on pyramids, or in some of the burial tombs that we'll be looking at in some of our later texts. These are the kinds of pieces of evidence that help us understand the technology of society. Who had access to these metals? Who created them? Were they from one place and carried to another? Were they part of a trade network? These are the kinds of questions that historians would have, and they will use them as they move forward to understand things. In terms of a graphic, all right? In terms of a graphic, what I would urge you to think about is take a look in your texts at something like the cave paintings, right? They will show you the early civilizations and what they're doing. Or in this case, I'm taking a look at here the Stonehenge settlement rocks, or the Stonehenge area in England. It is an ancient site. It is a very interesting one. It's not talking about the complexities here of technology. I mean, this essentially looks like a series of rocks, right, set on top of each other. Well, my 3-year-old nephew can do that. What this is instead, though, as we look at this more importantly, what we see is that these rock formations are not random. This rock was quarried far away to the site. It was carried to the site somehow, some way. People had to invest time. They had to invest money and energy in this. They had to find a way to align the rocks. And so as we look at the calendar in terms of we're looking at the moon phases and the phases of the sun, right? As we go through the year, for example, we all know the solstice in the northern hemisphere. The darkest day of the year is in January or December, and the lightest day, of course, is in June. These stone monuments are not randomly placed. They are not just put up as some sort of random religious experience. They are very carefully aligned with the solar and the lunar calendars around them. And the key element here is that this took organization. This is not random. There is some grand pre-thought here. And then we also have to understand that this is part of a larger complex. The ongoing work at Stonehenge has not completed yet. They're still finding other interesting aspects, ceremonial walkways that lead to this site. It is incredibly amazing. And this is what we're doing as historians. Once again, here is an ancient site. And we're looking at it not in terms of, oh, look, those are nice rocks piled on top of each other. No. What we're looking at here is evidence of how people constructed their civilizations in the past. What did they do? How did they do it? And why? Now, they did not leave a literate text behind. They didn't leave behind a guidebook for this. We have to take a look at this, look at the situation of where it is, align it with the astronomical things around it, right? The setting, the plane that it's in, how it orients with the various aspects of the sky. And then as historians, we can start to recreate some of the thought processes that these people had to put into this very important site. Also, and this gets back to the idea of the metals, right? Many things in nature rot and decay. We know wood doesn't last, feathers don't last, leather doesn't last unless it's under special conditions, right? We know that the various nature of things in nature is that it decays. So we are more and more dependent as historians on things like the Stonehenge site, or in this case, say, finding hoards of gold coins or silver coins or bronze jewelry or bronze tokens, right? Everything from the idea that these people had the metallurgy skills to do this, the symbols they left behind. Are these purely decorative? Are they having to do with religious ideas somehow? Are these concepts that we can use to understand their civilization somehow, in terms of the skill set they're able to use and the ability of them to have a market for things like this and the skills? Because let's also assume that somebody who has the high quality skills to work in metal and to design things as intricate as these things, let's also assume that they're not spending 7 days a week on the farm, right? So this is going to hint at other areas like hierarchies within societies and cultures, and this is once again be one of those gateway pieces of information that's going to get back to us understanding the past. All right. Now, as you go through these first series of chapters, recall, you always need to go back and take a look at the various forms of information in the reading assignments they have been looking at, and you want to also make sure that you do the practice questions to recover some of the basic information from this unit.